Good morning to you all. Thanks for the introduction. It is, as always, a great privilege to present the dairy information session to all you upcoming EHPs. This year it's a bit different than what we used to having a contact session at your campuses, but we are very fortunate to have technology on our side, and with Food Focus guiding us through this webinar, I believe it will be a fruitful session. Information on the dairy industry is a much bigger mouthful than we have time for today, and therefore I've decided to only highlight the crucial facts. If you need more information, you are welcome to visit our website. You'll find it on the slide, www.dairystandard.co.za, where you'll find 3 guidelines. You can have a look. There's one on the secondary dairy industry, that is the factories. There's one for the milk producers, which are the farmers. And then there's also one on retail bulk milk guidelines, which gives us a bit more information on what's happening in the milk shops where they have milk tanks. So please go and have a look. You'll find all the detailed information in that guides. At the end of this webinar, you can also send all your questions to my email address, which I will give later, and I'll distribute a compiled questions and answers to all the universities. But let's get started. Before we take a look at the primary industry, that is on the farm, and the secondary industry, what happens to the milk after it has left the cow, it is important to discuss the 2 key principles in the dairy industry, which are keep it cold and keep it clean. In other words, temperature and hygiene control. When we have a look at the first principle, it's important to keep milk and dairy products cold at all times, as higher temperatures will increase the growth and the multiplication of microorganisms. That will lead to an inferior quality end product that we do not want. The cold chain should be maintained at all times, from milking to the final consumption. Temperature probes must be correctly located to ensure that an accurate reading is obtained for the temperature, for example, in the cold room. The temperature gauges should be calibrated on a regular basis, and it must be accessible at all times. Verification of the temperature probes should also take place using a calibrated handheld thermometer. Complete and accurate records of temperature monitoring should be available, and temperature should be checked at least daily. According to Regulation 638, the finished product should be stored, transported, or displayed at a temperature between 4 and 7 degrees Celsius. You can see on the table it is stated that the required temperature of milk is 4 degrees Celsius. But please note that the law refers to the core temperature of the product and not the cold room temperature. As we go through the presentation, I'll show you the temperature requirements at the different stages of the dairy supply chain. Then when we get to the second principle, which is the cleaning part, it is important to have a look and note the difference between cleaning and sanitizing, and also the sequence in which we apply it. You can see on the slide that cleaning is the removing of food or soil from a surface, whereas sanitizing is reducing the number of microorganisms to an acceptable level. Important, always first clean and then sanitize. And make sure that you do not confuse sanitizing with sterilization, which is the killing of all microorganisms. Sanitizing is only to reduce it to an acceptable level. When we clean, we need water. On the farm, water is needed for the animals to drink and for cleaning purposes. And according to Regulation 961, the definition of pure water is it's clean and clear, and it contains no E. coli per 100 milliliter, and it's free from any substance in concentrations which is detrimental to human health. It is required that water tests be done quarterly until it complies with SANS 241. If it complies, after that, only annual tests is sufficient, but important to see that borehole, river and channel water must be tested more frequently because they have a higher potential risk. When we have a look at water at the factory, again, the water should be potable and it should comply with SANS 241. Ice that is used in the factory should also be made from potable water. And if potable water distribution network includes a chlorination unit, the latter should be equipped with an automatic alarm system, which is both visible and audible, and signals malfunctions and permits repairs. So that's important to note. Reservoirs should be in a perfect condition and regularly cleaned according to a specific schedule. A responsible person should conduct regular water quality tests to ensure compliance, and sampling is done at different points in inside the factory to ensure a representative picture. A plan with numbering of water distribution points should be available to make sure that the sampling is done at different points. If analysis at any case indicate potential hazards to food safety, the local authority must be informed and water should not be used. When we have a look at cleaning chemicals that we use during the cleaning process, please note that cleaning chemicals should comply with SANS 1828, SANS 1853, and it must also have the SABS mark. No fragrant and household products to be used, meaning sunlight liquid, handy Andy, any household chemicals should not be used, and people should be advised to only use the required cleaning chemicals. The storage of the chemicals should be in a dedicated, locked area, and no food containers must be used for cleaning chemicals unless it's suitably marked. The containers should be labeled with the supplier's name, registration numbers, SANS code, and instructions for use and safety details. As I've said, the cleaning chemicals and sanitizers must be registered by the SABS. And for each chemical used in the factory or at the farm, a material safety data sheet is required, giving all the information on that chemical. It is the responsibility of the chemical supplier to visit the facility at least once a month, advise and assist on the cleaning and the cleaning and sanitizing, and they must also provide training, and all the records must be in place of the contact of the chemical supplier. A master cleaning schedule shall be prepared in conjunction with the chemical supplier, and it must consist of items as listed on the next slide. So on the master cleaning schedule, the information that you will find on that schedule is typically the area and the list of items per area, the frequency of cleaning, the cleaning method to be applied, the cleaning equipment to be used, who the responsible person or people are that's doing the cleaning, who is supposed to check the cleaning process, and verification checks. So this is the typical information that you will find on the master cleaning schedule that should be in place. Cleaning equipment, when we have a look, color coding is important. The color coding of the equipment, make sure that dedicated equipment is used and that there's no cross-contamination between the different areas. And we need to make sure that that is in place. When we have a further look at the cleaning equipment, you will see this picture says 1,000 words. When using cloths or scouring pads, care should be taken to ensure that it's not a source of contamination. And when you have a look on my picture, on my slide, you'll see that is absolutely a source of contamination, so absolutely not desired. One-day use or disposable cloths are preferable, and alternatively, disposable or paper towels can be used. All brooms and hand brushes should be made of material other than wood and should have nylon bristles. We do not want to increase the contamination risk with the cleaning equipment. This slide gives us the two cleaning methods that we can use. The first one is COP, or cleaning out of place. That is manual cleaning, and it means that removable parts of machinery can be manually cleaned, and by removing the equipment and cleaning with the hand and with cleaning solutions. The other one is CIP, or clean in place. That means that equipment and pipe runs can be cleaned in place with water and cleaning solution without dismantling the equipment or pipe runs. The equipment should be properly designed for this cleaning method to be applied. Proper waste management is crucial whether you are on the farm or at the factory. Waste disposable areas should be dedicated areas, and it should be clearly identified. The location of the skips should be as far as practical from the processing area and ventilation systems, and it must be cleaned and odorless. Skips must be emptied, and this is important, at least once a week, and the waste containers in the facility must be emptied daily. On the farm, if there is combustible waste and if it is incinerated, it must be burned in an area at adequate distance from the milking shed to avoid a fire hazard, and we also do not want the fumes to go into the milk room. If waste containers are not stored in an enclosed area, they must be fitted with tight-fitting lids. When we go to the inside part of the facility, of a factory processing facility, waste containers should be in appropriate location in and outside the facility. It should be clearly identified, not to be mistaken for product or raw material containers. And waste bins should be easy to handle, clean and sanitize. Please note that when you have a waste bin inside the factory, it should have a bin liner, but without a lid. And this is to make sure that there's no contamination of hands when handling the waste. Waste bins outside the factory should contain bin liners with a closed lid to prevent the attraction of pests. Effluent is liquid waste. So we are on the farm and we need to get rid of liquid waste. It should be done in a suitable disposable system, and normally it's conveyed in a pipeline, a cement ditch or a container. Important that it should not pollute the water source and not cause a health hazard. When we have a look at effluent at the factory, it should be collected and hygienically conveyed toward suitable tanks. It is important to ensure that liquid waste is not an environmental contaminant, and that the correct effluent permits are obtained. And environmental management of dairy waste becomes an ever-increasing concern. Treatment strategies will need to be based on local and other regulations. It is thus essential that environmental management becomes a common activity of all dairy processing plants. The vehicles used to transport waste from processing areas to collection tanks should be cleaned and sanitized. And it is essential that particular care taken with respect to pest control in waste collection areas. If we have a look at pest control, and most companies will make use of pest control contractors, then there are certain criteria that we have to look at. The company that is being used should comply with legislation. Important that the technicians doing the pest control should be registered at the Department of Agriculture, and you will see that they will have a certificate with a P or T number on the certificate. Registration of a certificate for industrial fumigation is needed if it is applied, and all pesticides used in the pest control should be registered. And you can just have a look, they will have an L number on the product. They must be able to conduct in-house training of the staff, and comply with the code of conduct of the food company. Important to note also that the pest control company must visit the facility on regular intervals and make sure that the pest control is under control at any stage. The last part of cleaning is that of the people working or visiting the facilities. Management responsibility to ensure that there is enough toilets and basins for the use by the food handlers. Basins should be ideally not hand operated to avoid cross-contamination. And when we have a look at the hand washing facilities, there should be hot and cold water. Liquid hand detergent is preferred, and paper towels are the recommended means of hand drying. Refuge containers with bin liners and open lid. You'll remember this is inside the facility, so it must have an open lid. And there should be separate change rooms to be provided with lockers or other means for the storage of personal belongings. No direct entrance to the room where the toilet is situated. There should be a ventilated lobby. Good. When we have a further look at personal hygiene, it's stated that hands should be washed before starting work and whenever necessary throughout the day. You know that nails should be short, clean, with no nail polish, no jewelry allowed, and also smoking and eating is only permitted in designated areas. People should be refrained from personal habits in the production area, for example, spitting and chewing gum, licking fingers, touching hair and face. And it's important to give people training and to make them aware of personal habits. Just a few notes on protective clothing. It's again management's responsibility to issue all workers with protective clothing. Visitors and contractors should also wear protective clothing. The clothing should be in a clean condition, proper design, and it should not be worn outside the premises, outside the production area, and it should not leave the site. So that means that it should be cleaned on site at the laundry of the facility. When we look at personal health, it's absolutely, we can understand that there should be no handling of product when you have open sores or a contagious disease. Whenever a person has a contagious disease, it must be reported, and that person should get a certificate from the medical practitioner upon returning to work. Staff and visitors should complete a medical questionnaire to indicate their state of health. And policies and procedures should be in place to help the people on what to do after returning, after travel or after sick leave, and how to act when returning to the facility. First aid kit must be clearly displayed and identified with the correct signage. The contents of that first aid kit must be checked regularly, and each area should have a dedicated first aider who received the proper training. Cuts and wounds must be covered with waterproof dressing and glove, and there should also be a plaster and glove policy in place and also well communicated to the workers to make sure that there is no risk of contamination. That concludes our section on the key principles in the dairy industry. Due to similarities, it was decided to discuss the structural requirements of the farm and the factory as a unit. So that is what we'll be discussing now. Right, it is a legal requirement that milk sheds and processing facilities should have a certificate of acceptability. According to Regulation 961, the owner of the milk shed should submit with the application for the certificate of acceptability a site plan and a layout sketch. The certificate is then issued after inspection of the milking shed by the local EHP. Regulation 638 makes provision for the issue of a certificate of acceptability prior to commencement of food processing. It is therefore illegal to trade without a valid certificate. The certificate is also issued after inspection of the facility by the local EHP. It is the responsibility of the processor to be familiar with the content of Regulation 638 and standards such as SANS 10049. When we look at the grounds and the premises, the outside area should be maintained. Grounds must be free from uncut weeds and grass, litter and waste. Prevent the accumulation of equipment. This means that engineering and useful materials should be stored in an orderly fashion and not to harbor pests. And unused buildings should be kept clean to prevent pests. Control excessive dust, eliminate stagnant water, and control the access to the grounds by fencing walls to keep out the animals and unauthorized people. When we look on the farm, the animals to be controlled on the farm is all the other animals except for the cows. And when we go to the factory, no animals permitted, especially in the processing area. Floors and buildings. When we look at floors and buildings, the floors must be smooth and easy to clean. Tiles can be problematic due to breakage, and it has pores that can harbor microorganisms. There should be an appropriate slope for proper drainage, and drains and channels should be covered, but also allowing easy removal for cleaning and maintenance. When we go to the farm, there should be adequate standing room for the animals. And if we're on the farm or at the factory, there should be no direct connection with a room where gases, smoke, vapors, and dust is present. Walls, ceilings, doors, and windows must be smooth and easy to clean. Non-flaking paint to be used. The wall should be protected against damage by moving equipment. When there's false ceilings, it must be smooth and impervious to water and dust. It should also be adequately supported. Junctions must be closed and idly covered to assist with the cleaning, and the preferred finish is ISO walling. Opening for conveyors must be smooth and sealed. Doors and windows must be kept clean and in a good condition. Windows that can be opened must be fitted with a fly screen, and doors to production areas must be fitted with self-closing device, air curtains, or plastic strips. There should be adequate light, natural or artificial, in the facility. All lights should be in a working condition. It must be regularly clean and fitted with protective covers. There should be proper ventilation to prevent the build-up of condensation and the growth of mold. The air used for ventilation must be free from contamination. Good. With a good background on the structural requirements, let's go to the form and see what is required according to Regulation 961. It is stated in Regulation 961 that a milking shed shall consist of, first of all, a milking parlour. That is the area where the cows are milked. Then there's a milk room. It is also known as the bulk tank room, and that is the area where the milk is stored and cooled after milking. No animals allowed in the milk room. Then you get the change room. It is the facility where workers can change their clothing and prepare for work, and there's also a hand washing facility there. The scullery may be part of the milk room or it can be separate, and that is the area used for cleaning of containers and unfixed equipment. Important to note that between the milking parlour and the milk room, there should be a closed door. That can be locked when not attended, and it must be completely smooth and easy to clean as well. I just want to show you some pictures of a milking parlour systems that whenever you have an opportunity to visit a farm, that you will be able to identify the milking parlour system. The four systems that we get is the rotary, parallel, tandem, and then we also get the herringbone that can be either 30 degrees or 50 degrees. It is also important to show you the milking equipment, that when you are at the farm, that you will be able to identify the equipment and also know the function of the specific equipment. So let's go through the milking equipment on the farm. First of all, we get the vacuum pump, and the function is to create a vacuum by sucking air out of the system in order to suck the milk out of the cow's udder. Next one is the vacuum line, functioning, transporting the vacuum to the pulsator. Get a milk line. Milk line is transporting the vacuum to the cluster and transporting the milk from the cluster to the receiver. There's the pulsator, controls the liner movement, that is the sucking and massage phases. Cluster, that's the device for removing the milk from the udder. Vacuum regulator controls the vacuum level in extra air when vacuum level raising and closes when the vacuum level drops. The receiver, there you see it, is separating the vacuum and the milk. And the sanitary trap protects the vacuum pump from moisture and dirt. It is a good milking practice to inspect every cow's milk at the start of milking. And for this, a strip cup, California mastitis test or electronic system can be used. The foremilk or the first milk should be checked for anything abnormal, for example, clotting. And the first drops should be discarded as it contains a large number of microorganisms. Important to note is that the full milk should not be discarded on the floor, as this will lead to contamination. And then cows whose milk is unfit for human consumption must be clearly identified, and they must be either milked last or a total separate bucket or separate system should be used for the milking. The milk disposed in a manner to ensure that there's no contamination of the bulk milk. Good udder preparation is crucial, especially when raw milk is sold to consumers. With raw milk, there is no heat treatment to eliminate the E. coli, which might end up in the milk during the milking process. Well, in this udder preparation, use a drop hose and hands to remove the debris from the udders, and then the udder should be dried with a disposable paper towel. Use T-dips either as a pre-dipping or after milking when necessary. And the purpose of this T-dip is to sanitize, and it should be in contact for 30 seconds and then wiped off prior to attaching the milking unit. Remember never to pour the remaining T-dip back into the original container, as this will lead to contamination. When we look at herd health, it is important to know that every animal should be marked to identify. Every animal should also be examined by a vet at least once every 2 years, and there should be a register for each animal, giving information on disease, the vet examined, etc. The medicine should be stored correctly, and there should be a register for the medicine and vaccine for proper communication. TB, tuberculosis, and brucellosis are illnesses which can be spread from the cow to the human and vice versa. And therefore, it's important that there should be a valid TB declaration and a brucellosis declaration for each and every animal. The proof of the declaration that was issued by the state vet must be in place, and it is only valid for 2 years from the date of the last test. Right, we are now moving away from the farm to the processing facility, where Regulation 638 will give us guidance on the requirements for a processing facility. A milk tanker collects the milk on the farm, and the tanker can be from the processing plant or from a transport contractor. Now, if we have a look at the milking shed, there is a milk pipe from the tanker that connects to the bulk farm tank. And the distance between these two connection points should be less or equal to 6 meters. And the reason for this is that it can be then more properly cleaned, and the longer the pipe, the greater the chance of temperature abuse. In the milk room, there will be an opening, and that opening must be covered when it's not in use. Before loading the milk onto the tanker driver performs important duties. First, a sample is taken from the bulk farm tank to determine whether the milk can be uploaded. The temperature of the milk is measured, and if it is higher than 5 degrees, it is not accepted. The erythritol test is also conducted on the sample to determine acceptability. The erythritol test is a quick and easy test to determine the acceptability of raw milk. Equal amounts, 5 ml normally, of milk and glycerin is added and mixed in a sample container. The color and appearance of the sample is then evaluated. For normal fresh milk, the color is light purple with no flakes. For sour milk, normally this can be due to bacterial growth. The color will be yellow with large flakes. Sweet coagulation, that is when bacteria produce enzymes that coagulates the milk. The color will be light purple with large flakes. Mastitis will be violet with small flakes, and added alkaline, maybe due to cleaning agent, will be violet with no flakes. The tanker driver will only accept light purple, no flake milk, and will first make contact with the factory if the results show non-conformances. Other duties of the tanker driver is to take a sample at every milk shed and mark it to trace back if the lab picks up a problem. Remember that the milk of different farms are mixed in the tanker. The sample is being kept cold in a cool box and to maintain the cold chain. The sample should not be higher than 7 degrees at the final destination. It is also the duty of the tanker driver to clean and sanitize the tanker. And after the cleaning and sanitizing process, there should be less than 10 bacteria per 100 square millimeter. It is illegal to process milk that does not comply fully with the requirements of Regulation 1555, and therefore intake tests are performed at the milk processing facility prior to the offloading of the tanker. First of all, milk should test negative for inhibitory substances and will be rejected if tested positive. With inhibitory substances, the focus is on antibiotics, but it can also include iodine, which is a sanitizing agent, or hydrogen peroxide. You can see that the cholesterol test is done again at the lab as on the farm. Only milk with a light purple color and no flakes will be accepted. A resuscitation test is done to test the microbial activity in the milk, and the disc reading should be 6 and the color blue as indicated on the table. You can see again it's indicated that the temperature of the milk in the tanker should be less or equal to 7 degrees Celsius. Then we get the titratable acidity and the pH test, which will test the acidity or alkalinity of the milk. And normally only one of these tests are performed, and in most cases the pH. But titratable acidity spec is 0.15 to 0.18%, and the specifications for pH is 6.70 to 6.80. It is required that the milk should have no foreign taints or odors, and the freezing point, which is determined by using a cryoscope, should be minus 0.512 degrees Celsius. If the freezing point is higher, meaning it goes closer to 0 degrees, it will indicate that water has been added, and that is against the law to add water to the milk. The butterfat must test higher than 3.3%. Here's just a slide showing you the micro specifications of raw milk according to Regulation 1555. You can see there the total bacterial count should be less than 200,000 CFUs per milliliter. Coliforms less than 20 CFU per milliliter, and the E. coli absent in 1 mol and pathogens absent. If the intake test confirmed conformance to specifications, the milk can be offloaded from the milk tanker to a silo. If the milk is not heat treated within 4 hours after reception, it must be cooled and kept cold below 5 degrees Celsius. It must be heat treated within 48 hours, and no old and new milk must be mixed. The design of the silo must also be in such a manner that the raw milk is not contaminated. Our next focus point is the processing and packaging of milk. To me, product specifications are like lights guiding us through the dark to our final destination, which is a safe, good quality dairy product. You will all receive an example of a product specification, and that's going to be full cream pasteurized milk as a handout from your lecturers. And please keep it as a very good reference document. You'll see in the specifications there is a flow diagram of the processing of milk that I want to highlight 3 processing steps: separation, homogenization, and pasteurization. Consumers prefer different fat categories in milk. Milk is separated in a watery skim part milk and a fatty cream part in the separator, whereafter butterfat is added back in a precise amount to obtain the desired fat content. So that is the purpose of separation and standardization. In 2016, the the fat specification was altered to also include a medium fat category in Regulation 260. Since then, Regulation 260 was replaced with Regulation 1510, in which you will find the butter fat specification of milk as shown on this slide, which is high fat is more than 4.5%. Full fat is more than 3.3 to 4.5. Medium fat is more than 1.5 to 3.3%. Low fat is more than 0.5 to 1.5%, and fat-free is less than 0.5%. If raw milk is left to stand a while, a fatty cream layer will form at the top. And not all consumers want to see the fat they are going to drink in milk, and therefore the process of homogenization. With homogenization, milk is placed under high pressure through small openings, breaking up the fat globules into smaller uniform globules. These globules lose their tendency to stick together, with the result of a milk product with a uniform dispersion of fat. When we look at pasteurization, it is a heat treatment applied to milk with the aim of avoiding public health hazards arising from pathogenic microorganisms associated with milk. The indicated time and temperature combinations are defined by law and cannot be changed. These are also the parameters to be controlled. Pasteurization can either be carried out as a batch operation, with the milk heated and held in an enclosed tank, or as a continuous operation with the milk heated in a heat exchanger and then held in a holding tube for the required time. On the slide you can see the batch operation, which is the first one. Low temperature, long time, is higher than 66 degrees Celsius at 30 minutes. And the next one is the continuous operation, or high temperature, short time, is at 72 to 75 degrees Celsius for 15 to 20 seconds. With pasteurization, the milk is to be cooled directly after the process to 5 degrees Celsius or lower. To control the pasteurization process, there is a diversion mechanism that will, if the correct temperature is not achieved, divert the milk mechanically back to the balance tank to be repasteurized. The diversion mechanism must be calibrated. It is also noted that thermographic recordings should be signed by the factory manager and retained for at least 4 weeks. It is also advisable to keep the records for at least 3 months. And then after pasteurization, every batch must undergo the phosphatase test. And the purpose of this test is to determine the efficiency of pasteurization. Phosphatase is an enzyme normally found in milk, which is inactivated by the high temperature of pasteurization. If the test is positive, it means that the enzyme is still active and that pasteurization was not effective. After the processing of milk, we need to pack the final product. Now, the packaging equipment used in the processing facility should avoid recontamination of the product and packaging material. It should provide high hygienic standards during use. It should preferably be of stainless steel, and the material in direct contact with the product should be non-toxic, resistant to corrosion, resistant to chemicals, and resistant to the products. Only food-grade lubricants should be used. We said that important product information should be conveyed to the consumer, and that is precisely the purpose of labeling. Please check out our dairy labeling system on our website for guidance on product labeling. We are close to getting the final product to the consumer when we look at storage and transportation. It is illegal to pack products directly onto the floor, so use pallets, dummy crates or trolleys clearly identified for this purpose. All the products should be stored away from the wall. There should be a passageway of at least half a meter wide around the walls and the partitions. Do not stack products too high to prevent the damage of the products or packaging on the lower layers. There should be separate storage facilities for raw materials, in-process materials and final product. Ensure the VIVO principle, meaning first in, first out. Dedicated controlled marked areas should be available for reworkable stock and rejected products. Cross-contamination can easily take place from the cold room area to processing, and this can be prevented by thorough cleaning and the control of staff movement. When using pallets, please no wood pallets. Only plastic pallets must be clean, good repair and dried after washing before use. The key phrase to remember with transport is to maintain the cold chain. This is done through adequate covered loading facilities to protect the product from weather conditions. The product on loading should be at the correct temperature, the core temperature of 4 to 7 degrees Celsius. Note that the refrigerating unit in the vehicle will not cool the product down, it will only keep it cold. The vehicle inspection must be, you must look if it's clean and weatherproof, and also to make sure that the refrigerating unit is in a working condition. The product is now ready to go to the consumer. By adhering to all the legal requirements discussed in this webinar, we'll get to our final destination, which is a good quality, safe product. We're at the end of our journey through the dairy industry. Please send me your questions to my email address, jacqueline@dairystandard.co.za, and I'll make sure that you get all the answers. Thank you. Keep well and keep safe.